Bienvenida to Latina Literati. If you enjoy wonderful places, great books, interesting ideas, and people from the past and present, then this is the channel for you. So today we are going to talk about the book that is flying off shelves around the world called The Spare. It is Prince Harry's contribution to understanding his life. And so it is not a book that I would normally have purchased. A friend asked me to purchase it for her so that she could read it while she convalesced. And so having it in my home for several days, I thought, well, let me take a look and see what Harry has to say. So this 400-page book begins, well, let me stop here. If you've not read the book, you're interested in reading the book, you don't want to know what happens, you don't want to know the end, then this is not the moment to watch this video. Watch it after you've read it. So now that I have shared the disclaimer, we can go ahead and talk about the book. It begins with what a young boy remembers when his mother passes away. And what leaps out at you, at least leaps out at me, as a mother, a daughter, a sister, a member of humanity, is how it was possible that no one ensured that this young boy, orphaned by his mother being killed in a car accident in Paris, how no one ensured that he received proper support and professional help. Boarding school is not therapy, and we know that the British system uses boarding school as a way to toughen up children with mixed results. So when he eventually grows up and is able to get therapy, he is able to work through the trauma. It's just amazing because he keeps thinking that his mother is simply hiding, that she's going to come back. And it's just heart-wrenching to see this young child have to go through this. And it just, you can feel the pain and you can feel how very alone he felt, how much in need he was of just hugs, just physical reaffirmation of who he was and who he needed to be and what was expected of him. And so really, I think it just shows the pain with which he has had to live his whole life. So as an adult, when he finally goes to therapy, is able to work through issues, I think that's how he becomes a functional adult. So that first part is quite difficult to get through. Another part is all of the antics when he's a young man. And we all know, if you have children especially, when children act out, it is their way of asking for help. And so the more that they act out, the more that they're saying, I need help. I need someone to pay attention to me. And so that's quite obvious from all the antics. And again, I just think to myself throughout the book, I just kept thinking what different men these two brothers would have been had they had the solid emotional anchor of their mother present during the most formative years. How very different men they would be, and how very different leaders they would be. And so not just to them, but to all children who lose their mothers, it just seems just irreplaceable. So that's another part of a theme that I felt throughout the whole book. And so another part that just jumped out at me that was incredibly wrenching as I was reading it is how happy and how fulfilled and how enjoyable his army career is, because again, he's finding his group. And so he feels like when he does a good job in the army, he receives affirmation and he receives support and he receives accolades, and that's all wonderful. But at no time does he say, and I'm really sorry I participated in an illegal, unjust war, that 500,000 Iraqis have perished for no reason, that hundreds of thousands of Afghans have perished, men, women, and innocent children, for no reason. And so that made me very sad, because I think people who have suffered, you would want them to be empathetic with others that are suffering and not participate in their suffering. So that for me jumped out as well. The end of the book was a bit of a surprise, because I'm not a follower of these things, that he basically saw Megan in social media and asked to be introduced to her. It really was love at first sight. And I just kept thinking it would absolutely take a woman of color to be able to give a man who doesn't have the emotional anchor he needs, the emotional anchor he needs. So I thought, oh, well, this is completely, I now understand how and why this works, and how much strength they both must get from Megan's mother, because we all know that some of the most inspiring and strong leaders and women have been African American women. And so I give kudos to both of them for what I see is living through hell. And again, very hurtful, the whole interplay. I actually had a stepmother, personal note here. So I know exactly what it means when someone puts their well-being above the well-being of the children of the man that they supposedly love. And I understand completely what it means to feel those constant slights and humiliations, and understand that you are absolutely not at the core of what should be family. So I completely understood what he was talking about there in terms of his relationship with the woman who marries his father. And I feel like the end of the book, or where they speak of, for example, the terrible behavior of Megan's father, where he sells his soul, the willingness of the people involved to literally sacrifice children at the altar of the paparazzi to try and get some good coverage of themselves, I just think was such a wasted moment, because what could have been a moment when the family who wants to continue to have a part in the leadership of, I think it's 56 nations. 56 nations make up the Commonwealth. And most of the people who live in the Commonwealth look like Meghan Markle. I mean, when you look at the African nations that make up the Commonwealth, when you look up the Pacific Island nations, the Caribbean nations, the nations, around the world, you think, what a wasted opportunity. This would have been a moment when what is now the House of Windsor, because in 1917, the then king said, oh, we better change our German name to, let me see. Oh yeah, the name of the castle, Windsor. And so they went from a German name to the House of Windsor. So it's been a bit over 100 years that they've been called Windsors. But they still continue, and he mentions in this book that they continue, for example, the German tradition, which is also in Latin America, that you celebrate the 24th, not the 25th of December, and gifts are opened on the 24th. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit. But this was a moment that could have been used by the family that wants to continue to lead, to really bring unity and to show the members of the Commonwealth that there really is unity in this Commonwealth, by accepting a commoner who looks like most of them. In other words, looks like people from around the world, because that's the majority of people. And so to continue to think that a minority that behaves in such rapacious ways towards its children and towards members of its own family can continue to have anything to do with government, for me, is just not tenable. I just don't see how they survive. I do not see how this family survives the treatment of their own and the treatment of others around the world. I mean, we can talk about the theft of every single jewel that is part of the quote-unquote crown jewels. I think the Koh-i-Noor and all of those, in terms of cultural repatriation, need to go back to India where they were stolen from. I mean, and you could talk about that they were given, quote unquote, at the barrel of a gun, but the reality is that most of what makes up the wealth was not something that in any way was earned. And so, again, I was surprised, and I did not expect this book to touch me the way it did. But I do recommend it. If this is a topic that is of interest to you, I think it's an insight and a perspective you won't otherwise get. And so for those who say, well, he's just participating in the beast he hates, the reality is that he needs to take care of his family. And when you are raised, as we say in Spanish, como un inútil, when you are raised to do nothing, you've got to find a way to feed your family. And so if that includes working on the platforms and through the means that you would not be your first preference, you can do what you got to do. I haven't seen the series or the interviews or anything. This is the only information that I have. So, but really what came to mind was Gabor Mate, who is a fabulous Canadian doctor who deals with trauma. And so now for my book recommendations, highly recommend 3 of his books. His newest book, The Myth of Normal, is exactly that. It talks about how we think that modern society produces youngsters, that it's normal to be stressed, that it's normal to live through trauma, that it's normal not to receive what you need as a child, and what that means in terms of what are the consequences at the societal level, and there are lots. So we know through Dr. Mate's research that every point of trauma for a youngster multiplies manyfold the probability of addictive behaviors in the future. So not all addictions are those that we consider or we see most often, whether it's drug addiction or alcohol addiction or smoking. There are other addictive behaviors, and they can be everything from emotional eating to purchasing, acquisition of things constantly. The constant need to acquire things is addictive behavior. So there are 3 books that I'm going to recommend, all by Gabor Mate. As always, I will link them below. If you have a local library accessible to you or a local bookseller, we always prefer that you support your local booksellers. So if not, they'll be linked below in the description box. So Gabor Mate, 3 classics now of Gabor Mate's works are, the newest one is The Myth of Normal. When the body says no, because your body will say no when it's had enough. It will tell you. And 3, In the Land of Hungry Ghosts. Fabulous, fabulous books. Very insightful, well written, easy to read. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. And as always, we ask you to please subscribe, comment, let us know what you think. What are the things you'd like us to talk about? And we wish you, as always, mucho salud, mucho cariño y mucho amor. Muchas gracias.